I serve as a moderator of this talk, Suicide in Sports, with the 3 accomplished women of color who serve as mental health professionals in sports. First, we have Brandy Gresham, owner of Mornings Light Counseling and an athletic counselor serving college students on 2 campuses for 6 years. First, at Norfolk State University. I say that grudgingly. I have Tony in, and there's a big rivalry, okay? But now she is at University of Michigan. She has a bird's eye view of the issues, triggers, and demands of a college student, and is known for her stellar programming that addresses their concerns. Secondly, we have Dr. JaQuinda. Dr. JaQuinda Jackson of Jackson Counseling, a private practice where she treats female athletes and female former athletes who experience trauma in sports. Thirdly, we have Lauren Turner of Turner Practice, a mental health therapist that serves families and student athletes. She has a book, Athlete's Guide to Mindfulness, that is used by teams and individuals who promote good mental health practices, similar to flossing, to keep decaying thoughts from taking root in the mind, all in promoting good mental health. I do want to read the disclaimer. What we understand. Yes,
Okay, while we understand that the topic of the discussion is sensitive in nature and may cause you to experience a mixture of emotions, if at any point you want or feel the need to step outside, please feel free to do so. While this conversation is necessary, we want to ensure that each of you feel seen, safe, and supported throughout our time together, okay? In addition, we realize that there are various contributing factors that lead to suicidal and suicidal ideation, which we will not be able to cover today due to time. However, please know that we acknowledge them and acknowledge that they exist and should not be ignored. So we're going to keep this on the screen just so you can revert back to it, because it may get a little heavy, and that's okay. But if you do need to step out, feel free to do so. Okay?
All right. So with these experts, let's get to it. Let's start with the myths versus facts, okay? So Lauren, consider this statement. Is it a myth or a fact, and why? Talking about suicide will lead to encouraging suicide.
Well, thank you for asking that question, Monique. That is a myth. I think that when we talk about suicide, I think that there is a stigma around suicide and suicidal thoughts, but not talking about them doesn't make them go away. It almost actually gives people the opportunity to allow them to end up reverberating in their brains, and they end up being kind of an automatic thought that starts processing a little bit more frequently, and then it ends up turning into an action by not talking about it. And I think that when we kind of release some of the stigma of those negative feelings, or those feelings that you're experiencing, or thoughts of wanting to end your life, that one of the best ways to be able to prevent that from happening is by talking to someone about it, so that you can get the support and help that you need in the process.
Dr. Jackson, what about you and this thought? Suicide only affects individuals with mental conditions.
No, that's a myth. Suicidal ideation can come in all forms and can impact various people from race to socioeconomic status. It's oftentimes rooted in a mental illness and or when stress is exacerbated and they can't find a way out and they don't have the support to process through what they're feeling.
That's a good one. All right, Brandy, is this accurate or false? And elaborate why. Among U.S. college athletes, suicide is now the leading cause of death after accidents, and suicide ages 15 to 25 is the third leading cause of death.
What do y'all think? Y'all think that's true or false? It's true. And so that's a round of applause for that, because it's good to know. You have to be informed and aware of what's going on, and that is very accurate. Not too long ago, CNN published an article that talked about it, which why we felt it was important to talk about this topic. It is actually increasing, and as the lady said, I think what's happening now is that we're hearing about it more because people are following through, but in addition to that, they're utilizing resources, so now we can gauge the interactions, the sessions, and there are numbers, right? There are numbers that show, and or statistics, I should say, that show that suicide in sports is increasing, or suicidal ideation in student athletes, is increasing. And so it's a variety of different reasons, but that is an accurate statement, so that is not a myth.
Wow. So for all three, most suicides happen suddenly without warning. What are the signs and the symptoms? If this was a false or true statement.
Most suicides do not happen without any warning. Sometimes they may happen very suddenly and unexpectedly, but they usually do have some warning signs. So some warning signs to think about, especially because, as you mentioned, suicide risk increases between the ages of 15 to 25, which is the ages of most of you in this room, which means that you've had friends or loved ones that may be experiencing these thoughts or symptoms. And this is also the stage and age where severe persistent mental illness begins. So you may have had members of your teams that may be presenting with bizarre behavior that you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong with Bobby. And you know that he's been talking about, seeing something that nobody else is seeing. He's hearing things. He's now kind of on edge, irritable, and you can't quite pinpoint what's wrong with Bobby. That's sometimes a sign that he's not okay, or she is not okay. We're gonna generally ambiguously give Bobby some credit here. But we're gonna also think about what is something that they may be experiencing that we're seeing, the distressedness. I'm gonna let them kind of also give a little bit more on that too.
And I was gonna say, or add to, symptoms are usually present prior to someone either attempting and or committing suicide. However, it's not a one-step all. Like for some people, they're feeling different and they begin to isolate. For other people, it's, they have lost sports and they feel like their whole life is over and they don't have that person or that safe place to kind of talk through it. So they feel like their world is over. And as a trauma therapist, oftentimes an assault will happen and I can't talk about it or nobody believes me, so then they go inward. So it looks differently, but there are usually signs that come prior.
Brandy, before you speak, the key word she said is different. So if you see something different, then that should pique your interest to figure out what is causing the different action.
And sometimes it's not even like your friend is acting different and it's like, girl, are you suicidal? Sometimes it doesn't mean that, but it may mean like, okay, now I need to check in, or maybe I need to, get with the school counselor or someone that we all trust and support and be like, hey, can you check in to figure out like X, Y, and Z?
And so the ladies pretty much said it all, to be perfectly honest. It's not anything that just comes out of nowhere, so that is false. As they mentioned, it leads up over time. I know I mentioned earlier, a lot of times people are struggling with things and it's something that they've been struggling with. They just haven't said anything out loud or they haven't asked for help. And like she mentioned, it looks different for everybody. We don't have a cookie cutter process to say, well, if you see these signs, this is what this means and this is what you need to do. It's one of those things where we have to, you have to meet people where they are and kind of support them from that angle of things, because it does look different for everybody.
Just like,
Could I ask a question?
yes, you may.
I was just gonna ask, so what if somebody just seemed like they happy all the time, but they really going through something deep down inside? And I'm speaking on that because I was suicidal myself when I was younger, and I was always putting a smile on my face no matter what. I only had maybe one homeboy back at home, and that kind of caught on to little hints, like you said, seemed a little different off. And like, not many people could see that. But like every day I put on a smile, came in, did the same routine as the school day go by or anything. So it was like, how could you tell, or like, how would you try to figure out like if something is really going down with somebody if they always put a smile on their face, if they never seem like something's different for real?
So I will say this. That is exactly what we're good at, which is why I mentioned it's not a cookie cutter thing. A lot of us do that if we're gonna be honest. I tell people all the time we're excellent with having the best poker face ever. Okay, and so I would say to continue to show up, ask questions, like pay attention, check in. I know a lot of times we don't check in on our strong friends, right? So check in, and that's all a person could do, because you're absolutely right. If a person doesn't want you to know, they will really work hard on not letting you know. And all you can do is just try to ensure that you're there and you're open and you usher that environment where they feel safe enough to say something. And so that just, and then you all can chime in if you want. That's more of the reason why we should not do that. We deserve to be able to talk to somebody about how we are feeling to get the support we need, because that alone exacerbates whatever is going on with you, because you have to put this front on, and that's heavy. Who wants to carry that?
Let me ask this question. How many administrators do we have in the room? Raise your hand. Okay, so most of the time we are high achievers. So high achievers, depression looks different for a high achiever. It looks like you can't find your keys every time. You bite somebody's head off, it's like you want to kick the dog. Okay? So if we talk about student mental health, you also got to check yourself too. All right, so you come up with a smile on your face. Everybody's depending on me. I can't let nothing fall. I ain't got enough sleep, so I make bad decisions. Just keep that in mind.
I'm really happy that you mentioned high functioning depression, Monique, because I think that is one of the things that you'll see. You'll see that person taking on extra responsibilities, not being able to say no. They're smiling and crying at the same time, which is bizarre. And that will be a cue key that something is not right with the homie. Like, you have to also, like, you get to know people over time, and I think that sometimes people put on that smile because they feel invisible. It's important to let people know that we see them and their struggles, that we can tell, hey, I know you're smiling, but your grandma just died yesterday. Are you okay? And I think that sometimes when we acknowledge people's humanity in those experiences, and we can tell that they are actively disassociating by having that huge smile on their face when they really feel like dying inside, that is something that you want to check in on those people with, that you can see when someone's overworking, when they're taking on more responsibilities, and you know that they're really just digging themselves deeper and deeper and deeper into this hole. They're not saying no to more things being put on their plate. They're not sleeping or eating how they're supposed to. Those are key signs too. They're not taking a break from when you're doing let's say you're at football practice and the coach says go get water. They're like, I'm gonna do 50 push-ups while we wait. You turkeys are drinking water. It's like, no bro, drink your water. Like, you need to take care of yourself. That's also a sign that somebody also is not okay. Well, it seems like they're striving for excellence. If their mental state is not in a space where you can tell that they're functioning well, tell them time to take a break, time out.
And first, I just want to say I appreciate you for your vulnerability,
Yes.
especially in this space. But in regards to putting a smile on your face, to be very transparent, and I think I can speak for all of the clinicians up here, high functioning depression is hard for other people who are not in the clinical space to understand. So from the clinician standpoint, like for us, like we look at behavior. So we would, no, especially if we working with you, like we would, especially me, let me say that. I would tend to like check in, because if your affect is always the same, you're always like, even though I like that about you, that sets a cue off in my head, like we gotta have like a one-on-one, because you sure you good? So I appreciate you for saying that.
Yes, very good question.
And I wanna clarify, I am not a mental health clinician, but guess what? I got 3 friends. So you need to make sure you get some friends before you need the friends. Okay?
In other words, be proactive. Be proactive. A lot of times we operate and being reactive, and we should not have to operate or put into full effect damage control. We want to have the tools and the skills that we need. So when those things happen, life is going to happen. We're going to have problems. You're going to be sad. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be upset. You get to have all of those emotions. But when it becomes a little too much, we need to also be able to initiate some good coping skills. We need to lean in on our support system. Right? We need to be able to do that and then be okay with not being okay. Because you're not always going to be okay. You're not Superman or Superwoman. And that's okay too.
Hang that cape up in the closet, okay? Yes, ma'am.
And I apologize, this is just really kind of eating at me. I'm from the Native community, and our youth have like the highest suicide rates in the country. I know that's with communities of color. Oftentimes there's stigmas around seeking mental health and just admitting that you're having trouble and like the stoicism and all this. So I'm curious about how you try to break down those barriers for people who are taught not to talk about their feelings.
I think that's a really great question, and I feel like it's one of the reasons why we're here and in the spaces that we're in is because representation is so important. Thank you again for mentioning your own experience, because I feel like when you see somebody that looks like you sitting in a space that is across from you and you're having those feelings and you know that you're going to be met with the support that you need, that it helps you to feel more comfortable opening up about the discomfort that you're experiencing in your life. I used to work at the Native American unit here in the Department of Mental Health, and one of the things that made that unit so special was that other than me, and I guess I'm part Native American, because we're black people and we all got what we need in us. So it's, but like there's, sorry, that wasn't to be funny, and with love, but like there's also something that was really powerful about knowing that the cultural aspects of healing, right? So one of the things that's gonna happen this weekend is the cookout, right? And I think about that in terms of like the powwows that happen in the Native American community and how important those community-centered events are to allow you to be able to reground yourself back in the things that you hold to be your values when things don't go well, because life is going to happen and you're going to have these experiences that are stressful and challenging, and it's about having the support system even within your own community. Like us, we wanted to be here and do this discussion today because we wanted you all to see that there are people who look like you that are there to support you when you have these thoughts, not if, when these things come up, when they come up for your peers and your friends and your parents and your neighbor and the people you love too.
And I mean, for me, so I'm in private practice, so I can kind of do whatever I want to do. So I'm very innovative. I mean, sometimes I'm talking to my client and I'm talking to the mama too, like just to show like this is what therapy looks like. This is what it looks and feels like to process through your emotions. I also too, I pull up at practice because I think too, when we think about mental health and therapy, we think about like the office space and the person being stuffy. This is how I come to work. No, normally I would not have a blazer and I'm all tatted, but I meet my clients like where they are, because we have to start normalizing mental health and what it looks like. And I'm a believer, like I'm a therapist and I got my own therapist and she holds me accountable every Thursday at noon. Matter of fact, I need to email her because I'm not going to be able to see her. She holds me. Oh, I missed I believe that everybody needs a therapist, and we need to be able to model what it looks like. I'm also to somebody as a therapist that you are somebody who is in therapy, date your therapist. Like if there's not like a connection or we not connecting or it don't feel right, find someone else, but I meet my clients where they are.
And you can ask at your schools for another therapist if you don't like the one you got.
That's right.
That's all I gotta say. You can always ask for another.
You all, and I mentioned it earlier. That is key. I think a lot of times when we make that leap outside of our comfort zone to ask for help and to look for a therapist, you don't understand. Like, it's not personal if you don't like me. We're here to help you. We're not. I know I may not necessarily be everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. And so in session, I'm gonna answer your question to add to that. But like, I know when I'm in session and we have our initial session, I tell my student athletes and my private practice clients, listen, this is how this is gonna go, right? I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to support you, to educate you, to hold you accountable, to help you look at things from a different perspective. But I want you to be honest with me, because in order for you to do the work, you gotta understand, we're not doing the work. This is something you guys have to be willing. You have to make the conscious decision to say, number one, identify that this is a problem. It is causing some mix up in my life, and I want to do something about it. And once you get to that point, when you finally reach out for help, if that person is not for you, that's okay. But that doesn't mean stop there. We move on to the next. And a lot of people, that's where the ball gets dropped, because it's like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings. This is not about me. It's about you and getting what you need. And if it's not for me, then we go pass it over here to Doc, right? And if she can't do it for you, we go pass it to Lauren. And if she can't do it for you, we got enough connections to pass you to somebody else. But the point is to continue to try. But to answer your question, because it is stigma, there is a stigma associated to asking for help and going to therapy within our culture. Like Doc said, we have to be creative. I'm not stuffy by any means, so it's not gonna be we sitting in my office all day, right? So I'm really big on programming. We gotta meet the students. Like, I know for me, because I'm embedded in a college department, athletic department, we're gonna be creative with this stuff. Like, we're gonna have vision board parties with a DJ and food, and you don't even realize that you're working on visualizing what you want, what change you want in your life. You get what I'm saying? You know, we may get together and make some calming jars, right? But then while we're doing this particular task and we're engaging, now the environment has been ushered to where you feel comfortable to not only talk to your peers, but whoever else may be there, and you share. I never forget, several years ago, I started doing intensive in-home. So that's therapy for adolescents, and you're working in the home with them and their families. And I had my first teenager. That was not what I was trying to do. Okay? But it was a part of the job, but you know, you learn something new, and now I have experience with that population, right? And so I remember being in a car with a young lady, and I was picking up from school, and we were heading home to have her session, and I asked her something, and I know, and I'm quite sure you guys can agree. When I tell you I learn from the people that I work with and that I'm with, I'm like, people sow into me and they don't even know it. And so she said to me, Miss Brandy, just have a conversation with me. I'll tell you what I want you to know. It doesn't have to be, but it was so honest, and she was respectful, because I think a lot of times when you go into this space, because it's already awkward, you walking blind but walking nonetheless. But when they tell you something, it's really that simple. You'll be surprised what can come out of a unfiltered conversation. Because people tell what they want you to know when they feel comfortable, and it will come so easily. So I think just being creative is important, and just meeting people where they are, taking it outside of the office, and just making it fun. Because it doesn't have to be like watching paint dry.
Sessions like that.
So I want to go a little deeper. Remember I said these are my friends, right? So my friends have products, and this is Nat DeGray. She's also a therapist, and she had a book. And in the book, I learned about what secondary trauma. So I want to come to you, Dr. Jackson, about trauma. And the term I learned, which will help you as an administrator and student athletes, what is secondary trauma?
So secondary trauma is when you are either told or you have seen something traumatic and it affects you. So we can experience secondary trauma. Follow me on Instagram. I did a whole thing about Diddy, because we watch videos about that can give us secondary trauma, because we're constantly seeing it. And so then, even though we weren't actually there, our body responds as if we were there.
That,
Police brutality. We see it all the time. We've gotten so numb to seeing the negative things that happen to us on the street by the police. And it's on rotation all the time. Secondary trauma.
You are in LA right now. For those of you who are not from my city, welcome. And it is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We have the beaches, but we also have a very, very large homeless population here, experiencing the violence that you may see on the street when you see these things that you may not be able to predict, and you're a witness to it. That is also considered secondary trauma. When you have a student athlete that's come in and said, everybody in my family just died last week in a tragic fire, and you're sitting there holding space for them, that can also be secondary trauma for those of you in leadership who may not be acknowledging why you're so burned out and not understanding why you might be having some thoughts of wanting to end your life as well, because you're in there serving and you have no way to be able to tap into why you can't put your finger on why you feel so terrible about these experiences too.
I want to share a personal situation. So at the time I was the associate commissioner for the CIAA, and I was going through a divorce, and I didn't know it needed to take time. I was moving. I mean, really moving boxes and moving, because I'm going to make it. So let's fast forward. I ended up having 2 accidents in 6 months. The last one I had, I crossed 4 lanes on the interstate and was facing the cars coming. I totaled the company car. I was afraid of my boss. And I said, he didn't do anything. My point was, in my mind, I wish I had died than face my boss, because I didn't want to let him down. That's why I said, athletic administrators in here, pay attention. You don't set boundaries. You don't tell somebody you want to be superwoman. Get you some friends. And if you want to hear that, is how it all ends. I do have a book called publicfiguremask.com. So this is, and again, it does have the strategies, because you got to see what it looks like. You don't necessarily, it's not necessarily like what you see in the headlines. It is, like, for instance, I will not watch a reality show. I'm not talking to nobody who's going through a divorce, because I'm not going back to Vietnam, if you will. You see what I'm saying? You got to know your triggers. And after I started going to therapy, my career soared. Get you a therapist. All right. So, Brandy, tell me, what does? Oh, okay. Okay, tell me, what does secondary trauma look like on teams?
Okay.
You're in a competitive setting.
It looks, to be honest with you, I'm not gonna use the word the same. I could give an example, and this was something that literally knocked my socks off. What year is this? We're in 2024. So the beginning of 2023, the academic year started, was in August. And you get the freshmen that come in from different places, they're ready, they want to have a good time, they're making connections with their teammates and so forth and so on. And so, there's a promotion of a lot of activities that are going on in the city. And so a number of our student athletes, a number of the regular student body population, they went to a particular house party that was in a decent neighborhood. It was closer to a PWI that's in the area of Virginia that I was residing at the time. And there was a mass shooting. So the kids, they think they're going out and doing what you do when you're in college, having a nice time. Went to the party. It was something apparently that was already set up. The individuals that came to the house, it was somebody in particular that they were looking for. And you would have thought they were in, I don't want to say Vietnam, but we could say Iraq. The weapons of mass destruction that everyday people had came up in that house and lit that house up. It was over 2,000 shells, right? One of our students was murdered. She was with her friends. People had to jump out of windows, and they got injured and all of this stuff. And I remember getting a phone call like, Brandy, we need you to do A, B, C, or D with this particular team to process what happened. We talk about secondary trauma. What do I say? And I'm human too, so I'm a therapist second. What do I say to a group of people that experience this very traumatic event, has crossed over their friends whose brain is literally on the floor? Somebody else is laid out dead in the front yard. What do you do with that? How do I show face? Can we talk about showing face? Because I can't cry with you. I got these teammates screaming, they crying. It's like, what do you do with that? So secondary trauma looks just like that. Because as a professional, that was one time where I could honestly say, and I don't know if y'all can agree, when you're working in this field, you hear a lot of terrible things. I mean, the worst of the worst. And you literally become numb to it because you're helping people navigate through some of the toughest times of their lives. And it's not about you in that particular moment. You have to make sure that they are okay. But how do you sit there and act like you good with all of that? And so with team secondary trauma, it looks, as we somewhat mentioned, people taking it on. That particular situation, you couldn't tell me that some of my students didn't end up developing PTSD. That was hands down. So it looks like what we pretty much talked about. It's something you take on. It's unintentional. It's comfortable. You can, lean in on the people that you have to get the support, but it's just one of those things where I tell people all the time, we have to go through it. We can't go around it, under it, over it. We can't erase it. It happens, but just identify better ways for us individually how to deal with it. But that's what secondary trauma looks like for a team. And just knowing that it comes in waves and providing continuous support for them when that happens, because it does.
Can we talk about support?
One of the other things that it also looks like, especially in administrators and even athletes that may have experienced it, is burnout. So it may come out in ways where they may say, I don't even want to play the sport anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to practice. I don't want to do these things. I don't want to go to work anymore. I don't want to go to class. I can only go to practice, or I can only go to class, but I can't do both. I'm burned out. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. So when you start hearing those types of things, either from your colleagues or from your teammates and classmates, just know that that is also sometimes a sign of secondary trauma, that's another way that it can manifest over the course of time. Just wanted to pick that up.
Good.
Thank you
And
for sharing
so,
that story, Brandy.
that was a lot, y'all. To be perfectly honest, I remember that was heavy, and I think that was the first time in my professional career where it took me a minute to shake that off. It made the news. It was terrible. It was just like, what am I did a good job with showing face, though. I mean, they didn't know, but you think because we're professionals that we are exempt or we don't experience those things, but some of this stuff is heavy. But you mentioned you wanted to say something before I told you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the secondary trauma and the things that you said. I remember when Michael Jackson died. I didn't realize that I was sad. You know, because we were playing all the music and we were living it, but I was blue and did not know. So it's kind of like that kind of thing. You don't know it. I mean, y'all got somebody in your life just like Michael Jackson to y'all, I'm sure.
That's how it was when Nipsey Hussle died in the city.
Yeah.
You could feel the entire city of LA is shut down for the day because everybody was going to the Staples Center, which I don't remember the new name of the building. It's going to be Staples
Crypto Center.
Crypto Arena. And people were on their way there, but you could feel the lull in the city. You could feel the sadness, right? That is everybody kind of doing a group grieving to a degree, group processing grieving, and it's Kobe, because they died very close together, and Kobe's funeral wasn't as public as Nipsey Hussle's, but you could feel the energy, you could feel the people grieving that. You can even see it in the artwork throughout the city. You'll see both Kobe and Nipsey murals all throughout. So please observe the art when you are here.
So just be kind of paying attention to some things that are important to realize. I might not know the name of the person, but if they I had some California kids, and I teach at Hampton University, and they played. I let them play. I didn't know how to do it in my own car. He played the stuff on my car, you know, I didn't know you could do that back then. So I let him play all his songs in my car. Yeah.
Love Monique so much.
So I was like, just so that he could, we were working a tournament. And I said, okay, I need you to go pick up so-and-so, do so-and-so. So pick me up. And I'm listening to, I said, I know this ain't on the radio because it's all the same kind of stuff. It's, oh yeah, I plugged my phone into your car. And I was like, okay, he needs it. You know what I'm saying? He needs it. So those are maybe it's practice and you use their playlist. You know, so things such as that. Okay, last question. Coping skills. I just gave one.
Music is a great one.
Okay, what else y'all got?
Breathing work is I feel like is necessary because oftentimes we don't realize like we can be reading stuff or watching something and we're like holding our breath. And when we do our breathing work, it calms you down, like it centers us.
I call it breathing on purpose. You kind of naturally breathe, but sometimes you have to breathe on purpose. You have to be intentional about the breaths that you're going to take. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, you're right, because, breathing on purpose, because you need to do that sometimes. I will say this, coping skills can be a number of different things. And I'll share some, but one thing is what may work for me may not work for you, and that's okay, and you are to know that. It could be anything from cooking, sewing, knitting, swimming, right? We out here trying to be mermaids in 2024.
You guys missed my first presentation for those of you who missed it.
And so you have to do what's best for you, but I know a lot of times during my first session, I give out like 100 different coping skills for people to look through, and I always tell them to try something on a list that they've never done before. Because we box ourselves in and it may just be, I listen to music all the time. Okay, well, if you can't listen to music, I need you to have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G of what may be beneficial to you to get you back to your baseline. So it can be anything. I know being transparent and sharing, maybe we can share. One of my major coping skills, because we are walking dumping grounds, right, and empaths, every night, not on the road when I'm traveling, I can't really do it, but every night I do a night ride. Me and my dog, I get in the car. It's normally after like 9:30 p.m. I have, depending on the mood that I'm in, I have so many different playlists because music is my safe haven and has saved a lot of lives. And I'll put my playlist on and I'll drive for like a good 20 minutes. It's even to the point where if somebody happens to call, whether it's my family or my friends, they'll be like, you in Caution? That's my dog's name. It's Caution with a K. They'll be like, you in Caution out on your night ride? Yes, and they know. So that's what works for me, right? Putting boundaries in place. That is a coping skill. You know, we say one thing, but do another, right? We have to be intentional about what it is. If it is our responsibility for people to learn how to teach, how to treat and handle us, we have to have certain things in place. You can't say, oh, you can't do this, but then they get away with doing it. You know what I'm saying? So boundaries is a coping skill because it helps you. It puts those safeguards in place for you to be okay, even when you're not okay, but it just puts the safeguards in place to reinforce what it is that you would like and what you are trying to evolve into with becoming a better person.
You get to share one of your coping skills.
Ooh. Okay, so I have a routine coping skill that I do.
Tell us your routine.
So when I leave my office, I go home and I sit in my car for like 10 to 15 minutes. My kids know not to come out and say anything because I just got a woosah. And then if mommy goes straight into the bathroom and the lights are off, I'm taking a shower with the lights off and a candle.
That sounds really relaxing. I like that you guys shared two different things. I'll give one. I have many coping skills that I use. One, I practice mindfulness. Two, I also do exercise as one of my big coping skills, and I run. I run in a group, even though at this big age, how am I running with a team? Right? But it has also to help to create a sense of community for me, similar to the teams that you're on now. So like, let's say for instance, you're playing a sport, but one of your coping skills can be not necessarily to do your actual sport, but to do something a little bit different that you also enjoy. I encourage my children to learn to do things that they like. So I have one kid that really likes to draw, and he has meltdowns. He's 5 years old, and he's in kindergarten. And kindergarten is very, very emotional if you've ever met a kindergartner. They have very big feelings. She has a kindergartner as well. And they have very big feelings. And he loves to draw. So whenever I can see that his feelings are getting big, I say, why don't you go and sit down with your paper and your colors and make a picture about what you're feeling and experiencing. I have another kid who loves to play music. He's a musician. So I say, why don't you go and sit at your piano for 10 minutes and maybe you'll be able to think something out of whatever it is that you're doing. But your coping skills can also be things that you love to do. So calling a friend if you're feeling like you're having a panic attack, yes please. Checking in with your mama if you like her and she's nice to you is a good thing to do. You notice I put those monikers, and if you know that she's gonna make you be in a bad mood, don't call somebody else. You see that that's a coping skill because it's a boundary too, right? If you have a trusting coach or person at your school who's a grown-up, sit in their office and bother them like Brandy loves for her athletes to do. She's like, come sit, and I'll make a space for you.
So I hope you find this very helpful. We'll open it up for questions. Please go ahead and ask your question, and if it's to one person, let us know. Yes.
I have a question for you all. So you guys say the number of suicide in sport is increasing. So what do you think is the reason for? Because we have a more support from council and the athlete part. So what do you guys think?
What I do think, while there is support there, there can always be more. And just because support is provided doesn't mean they're being utilized. In addition to that, I think, I'm telling my age a little bit, being a former athlete, the athletes of today, the world is a little different. The pressures is a little different. Social media to me is the devil. But that's my opinion. You know what I'm saying? That's my opinion. It's some benefits to it to an extent, but you have to know when to put it down. You have to understand that people are living out loud in their delusions, right? People only show you what they want you to see.
Can you say that one more time? Repeat that.
Oh, People are living out loud in their delusions. And so, like, real time. And so, a lot of student athletes, or just people in general, that's God when it's not. It's not fact. And so, I think the pressures are different. The expectation for you to show up and to minimize what it is that you may be feeling. That may not be people's intentions, even with some of the administrators, even with some of the coaches. You know, I've sat on a number of different organization committees, and I tell you, from the youngest age of like 4 up into in your 20s, the number one issue that student athletes have starts with their coaches, believe it or not. Right? If they can't emotionally regulate themselves, how they gonna help you? Right? And so people end up suffering in silence and they don't share. And so because they don't feel safe, yes, the resources are there, they're suffering in silence. So then, you get to a space where this is the only option, which is not true. And they don't think.
And I want to add to that, and I know people feel some type of way when I say it. Yes, the resources are there, but is it the correct resources? Because some people are labeled as clinicians or therapists, but they have a science background. And that's not a problem. But if a student athlete is coming and saying, I'm having mood swings or I'm experiencing suicidal ideation, like that needs to be handled by a clinician, which looks completely different than a mental performance or a sports psychologist. And don't get me wrong, I love all of them, but I think when we have the lens of working in institutions, we have to make sure that the resources match the need versus, I put somebody in a mental health position because they have X, Y, and Z. Like, there's a difference between a clinician and then somebody who has a science background.
One of the other things that I want to say is that there's also a huge comparison analysis that you get to see on social media that you don't necessarily have from our generation, because we're a little older than y'all, right? Is that like we didn't have social media, you had to do a lot of work to put a picture up on there, okay? And now you can do it instantly and in 3 seconds and you're posted, and that can be anything that you do. The amount of tax that's put on young people, especially the young people in this room, is significant, right? So you have all of your successes and your failures for public review. And let me tell you, I'm grateful that I was able to fail some of that time in private, because if they had a cell phone out, I'll tell you about me another day. But the reality is that when you have these things that, and people feel like they don't have anywhere to reach out, one of the resources that I really want everybody in this room to take into consideration is the texting tool 311, which gives you the opportunity to reach out if you are having suicidal thoughts. That's separate from your school, and it's something that is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and it's something that we want people to know that you can use, and you can just text that number, and it's like 911, but with a 3 instead, to be able to 988, I'm sorry, I got the,
It's not different.
it's 988, I'm sorry, I got the number confused with something else. It's a resource here in the city. No, there's a 311 too, that's also a mental health crisis line, but the 988 is the crisis line that you can text for the universal one. Sorry, I got the numbers wrong, you guys, I'm a little sleepy.
It's okay.
It's my third talk today.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Is it me?
Yes.
Me? Okay. Brandy touched on it a little bit, but definitely you. Can you explain so that they are aware too what it is and how it looks very different, mindset and sports psychologist versus a clinician or a mental health therapist? Can you explain that so they are able to identify who their resource really is?
Right. So a mental performance or a sports psychology, oftentimes, or they work on performance and outcomes. A mental health clinician, diagnosis, but also assesses symptoms and help you manage those symptoms. And then if there are, if you are experiencing, or for instance, I'm a trauma therapist, so I often get referrals from mental health clinicians who say hey, this person has experienced trauma and they need to work through it. So then they're referred to me. But the mental performance and sports psychologists work with the performance and outcomes. And then the clinical, we do diagnosis and we work with mental health symptoms or mental illness symptoms.
That's a great question. And people don't often know what the differences are between the disciplines.
Universities don't.
Right, because they asked me to do your job, and that is not what I do.
and to be very transparent, we can collaborate.
That's what we do.
But when somebody is, I'm working on my shot or I'm working on my time, and I'm you need to go see your sports psychologist. But because I know my wheelhouse, and I often think too that having a mental health clinician in the sports world feels new. But I think there is this whole dynamic of this is my player, and I'm it's another
We were territorial.
Right.
For no reason. For no reason.
Tell them again, for what?
Tell us how you really feel.
One more time, let me zoom in. What is it?
No reason.
Thank you. We need that.
These are all our student athletes.
Right,
Okay?
that's
Yes.
right.
But we can do our part to support student athletes, and I think oftentimes, if I'm real transparent, that the student athlete can get lost in the shuffle because leadership, trying to
And loyalty to this person, and this person goes to my coach, please.
But if you work in your wheelhouse, then overall, the student athlete will be uplifted.
And then just being educated, if you don't know, ask. And this goes for the administrators in the building, so in the room too, people don't know. They don't know what they do not know. And a lot of times that ends up putting us in positions to utilize what we do know, which may not be the best approach because you're going off of your personal experience. And we don't need you to project on these student athletes what you did, just like parents, or just anybody that sows into people. Your way is not the way.
Right.
And it's not the only way. So if you don't know something, ask. And that just goes for everybody. Doesn't matter if you're a student athlete, a coach, a professor. You gotta ask questions to know what to do. And it's okay not to know. You get what I'm saying? Like, I think that's another reason why we box ourselves in, because once again, the importance of asking for help. If you don't ask, you're making matters worse. You know, and so in order for you to do better and to make better informed decisions, if you don't know, it'll be in your best interest to just ask questions so people can point you in the right direction.
So, if you have someone say, just pray about it, run fast.
And think of it more as a yes and. Yes, you can pray about
Yeah.
it. And go see a therapist.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
go do your push-ups and drink your water and take your vitamins and
Yeah.
all the things. Don't just think that you can only do one thing if you're feeling unhealthy.
Right.
You must do more than one. I mean, prayer,
It does work.
It's
Don't get me wrong, it does.
but
does.
it also really works good when you're praying to find the right therapist, okay? God works for people.
Yeah, because when she said what worked for you, that's what I'm saying. Back in the day, that's what they said. And you have to understand, in our community, medical assistance was not trusted.
We don't do that.
Okay, we say Tuskegee experience.
Yes.
All right, so you have to understand the culture of why. I got a husband, man, that I've been in the ER for like 3 weeks because the man won't take it. He don't trust nobody. And he a former athlete.
And
So-
she's better than me, because I told my husband, I said, if you don't start eating your vegetables, you're gonna be eating by yourself, okay? Because not taking you to the ER ahead of time. I get that. Take care of
You follow
yourself.
what I'm saying? You know, people have their experiences and you can't live their life for them the second time. Be the example for them. Show them, like I did. Nobody believed I need to go to therapy. I said, well, you see it better than me, don't you? Don't you want to get better? This is why I wrote the book. Because I knew athletic administrators did not know that you could be the top A. Let's put a plus on it.
That's right. That's right. And what she said makes a lot of sense about her husband when she mentioned, and he's a student athlete. You all are as well, right? Those that are in here. You are then going to grow into a full-grown adult with responsibilities. And if you have that mindset, you know, he had that mindset of not going to the doctors when he was in his 20s, you better believe you go have it in your 40s, unless you do something different. And then you have the nerve to populate the earth.
Yeah.
You populate the earth, and then that same mindset that you have, you sow into your children.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how the cycle starts.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just ongoing. And we deserve better for ourselves. You know, we do. And so that's what I have to say about that.
Can I add something to y'all real quick?
Of course.
Because all of them are so dope. Really, I love them all. But I really do want you guys to know how important it is to reach out for the help that they're talking about, to ask the questions, to be there for your friends. Don't minimize people. We are Black culture. A lot of times in our families, we grow up and we say, oh, keep this in the house or whatever. And I don't know if y'all said that when I stepped out, but it's super important that you talk to people because everybody is going through something no matter what they look like. And if y'all were here from the beginning, Buddy right here that said that, that's what we do a lot. We joke a lot, right? We smile a lot, we laugh a lot, but we're hurting inside because we feel like, oh, I can't, they told me not to tell this person or my coach, I can only talk to him. Anybody that tell you that they're your only person is not your person, okay? You should have different people for different things, period, just like you got different outfits. You understand what I'm saying? You don't wear that same outfit for everywhere you go. So you need different people for the different places that you're going in your life. You understand? So please make sure you reach out to them, connect them, and they are real. You understand? So a lot of people you meet in these spaces, they tell you, oh, follow me on Instagram and da-da-da. No, they will get back to you, okay? And I know I certainly do, but I love y'all. I think this was a dope session. It's so necessary for our kids and everybody, too. Somebody get me a therapist, okay?
So I think that's a good way to end. So you have our way.
We can go back to the, if you want to go back to everybody so y'all can get the information.
Yes.